Today is June 20th, 2017, and this is the beginning of an interview with Don Ritter, a U.S. Army veteran. My name is Laura Gill, and I will be the interviewer. So, Mr. Ritter, if you could tell us a little bit about your biographical history, where and when you were born.
I was born in northern Indiana near a town called Ligonier. And later in life I went to high school in Cromwell, which was not too far from Ligonier. But my father was a tenant farmer, and we moved quite a bit, and we lived in southern Michigan for several years. And when I was 10, we returned to Indiana and lived on a farm between Ligonier and Cromwell. And as I said, I went to school and graduated from high school at Cromwell.
What year did you graduate high school?
1951.
1951. Do you remember what your mascot was?
Mascot, I don't think we had one. Basketball was king in Indiana in those days, and we had the Wisconsin Fight Song was our song, and I do not recall that we had a mascot.
Did you play any sports or do anything like that when you were in high school?
I was active in music. I played in the band and sang the chorus, and tried out for basketball once and had my tonsils out and didn't go back.
What instrument did you play?
I was a trombone.
Trombone. Do you still play?
No, I've given it up. I haven't played in several years.
Did you, or do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have one brother and one sister.
And what number are you?
I'm number one.
Oh, you're the big brother.
I'm number one.
Okay. Are they still here?
They are still living. My brother lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan, is a snowbird to Phoenix. My sister lives in Paoli, Indiana.
Did either of your siblings serve in the military?
Yes, my brother served in the Air Force for 4 years and spent a few years in Germany. Got married over there, as a matter of fact. Had two marriage ceremonies. One for the civil ceremony, and then the one with the military.
Did you get to go?
Oh, no.
You didn't get to go. If you don't mind, may you share a little bit about what branch of the service you were in, if you were drafted, and what your job title was, and a little bit about your training. So we'll kind of go in that order.
Probably I really should lead into that by saying that I was in college, and the Korean War was winding down while I was in college. In fact, ended while I was in college. But they were still drafting, and it was difficult to get a good job because nobody would hire you knowing that you were going to be drafted. So I wrote my draft board and I said, what is going to happen? They said, in 6 months we're going to get you. And so I, in frustration, got some advice, and the advice was volunteer for the draft, and at least you can determine when you go, which is what I did. I had everything. I had my orders or the papers that said I was going to go in August. In May, I got my orders to leave, and in panic, I went to the university dean, or went to the head of the department who sent me to the dean, who very calmly wrote a letter on my behalf to the draft board, and they deferred me, as they should have done. That was the way it was. That was what the paperwork said. And but I graduated from college on August the 7th, and August 17th I was in Fort Leonard Wood.
Oh, wow. So what did you get your degree in college?
Music education.
Music education, yes. Okay. So that will maybe come into play later, I guess?
Yeah, yes, as a matter of fact, it will.
All right, so would you share about your time when you left to go into basic training and when you got sworn in and what you were feeling and thinking at that time, and maybe a little bit about basic training, your basic training days?
Well, let me see. They sent a bus to a town in northern Indiana where my draft board was, and they took us to Indianapolis, except that the bus broke down.
Oh my goodness.
And we spent a lot of time about 2 hours laying around in grassy banks, roadside banks, waiting for the bus or replacement bus. I've forgotten how they resolved it. And we got to Indianapolis at 5, and too late to start the physical and all of that. And they put us in the YMCA. How do I say this on tape? I probably should not have laid around in that grass because they were what we in Kentucky called chiggers. So the first few days of my military experience, I scratched around quite a bit.
Oh my goodness.
The next day they started the process, and we had our physicals and all of the things they do, most of which I have forgotten. And then they put us on a train for Fort Leonard Wood that night, and at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning we arrived at Fort Leonard Wood, and I had my first breakfast in the Army with powdered eggs.
Oh, yum, so
Yes.
delicious. So where did you get did you already have short hair, or did you experience your haircut at
Well, that's a good question. How did you know?
That's always a big deal.
I actually had short hair. You remember, I was a naive 22-year-old guy. No, I wasn't even 22 quite yet. And so I said, well, I know they want me to have a short haircut, so I'll go ahead and get my hair cut. And I did. And then in part of processing in Fort Leonard Wood, I got another haircut and had to pay for it.
Oh my, yes, they want you to have it nice and short.
It was nice and short.
When you got to basic training, do you remember or recall a specific instructor that you had? What were they like, if you remember?
Well, before I answer that question, they transported by train about 150 of us from Fort Leonard Wood to Fort Dix. And so after processing in, getting uniforms, etc., we went to Fort Dix, and I did basic training in Fort Dix. I had a number of sergeants, had a lieutenant who was the commander of the company. He was, I remember the first morning out in training, and he said, "It's a beautiful morning, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah." And you can guess what his response to that was, and that's where I learned quickly to say, "Yes, sir." But I had some sergeants who were, who I really appreciated very much, and I don't remember names anymore, but I do remember that they were the first one. I guess it was the first night we were told to have our rifle cleaned the next morning, oiled and cleaned, and so we had gotten moved in, and in the process, I moved from the first place to the second place, and I thought someone had stolen my toilet articles, and they hadn't. They were in the first. But I thought, well, I got to get that rifle clean. So by this time the lights were out, so I went to the latrine and I was working on it, and this sergeant came in and he said, "Soldier, what are you doing in here?" And I told him, and he says, "You just get right back in there and get to bed." And he said, "Quit worrying about that." He was a good guy. We had at least two I recall that were just good guys. And
So what season was it when you went to basic training?
it was August.
It was August,
September,
that's right. Okay, so so it wasn't too terribly hot while you were.
Well, not in New Jersey. I mean,
Yeah.
it was warm at times.
So after you went to basic training, what specialized training did you have after that, and where was it? And if you could share a little bit about that.
I, as a draftee, was very fortunate. I apparently scored very high. I imagine, actually, as I remember the test, I probably got a perfect score in the code test. So they sent me to radio school, and that was a good deal for 2 years. And so I did my training in Fort Dix. I stayed in Fort Dix for close to 6 months.
For your radio training?
Yes.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
It was okay.
Yes. In fact, later, my oldest son, who had a great interest in radio, and a friend and I worked on ham radio, and we built a radio. So I maintained that interest for a number of years. I've long since left it now.
While you were at your specialized training, did you make any friends that you sort of hung around with during that time? And can you talk about maybe what you guys were able to do, if anything, after your work day? If you had free time, what did you like to do? If you can remember.
You have to remember, this was 60 years ago. I don't remember my own name half the time. Yes, I met one gentleman in particular. He's now deceased, but from Ohio, and we had really met in basic training. Went in New York City together on leave or on weekend pass, and what did we do in our off time? I like to read. I did a lot of reading. Sometimes we played ping pong and things like that.
Did you get to listen to music? Did you like music?
Not
at
a
that
lot.
time period, no?
Boy, I like music, but no, we didn't really have much opportunity to listen other than what they would play in the PX and things like that. But,
yeah. So when you went to New York, do you have any special memory of that?
well, I really do, but it's not related to my friend in the Army or the Army.
Well, you can still share it.
Okay. When I was in college, I played in dance bands to work my way through school, and the nephew of Eddie Arnold was our drummer, and a very good drummer. And so while I was in New York City on my first pass, actually this was basic training, I went to the YMCA and got a room, and I was standing in line in Times Square, and you know, there are a lot of people in New York City, and I'm standing there, and who should come along but my friend. His name was Jerry, and by coincidence he was getting ready to leave New York. That night he'd been there studying percussion and later played on television. I remember seeing him. So we got together and we went to the Blue Note, saw Stan Kenton, and had a good time. I saw him off on a bus at 1:30 in the morning, and I guess I've never seen him again except on TV.
But that was it. Well, that happened during your military time, so that's a neat memory. Did you? I guess you stayed in the barracks the whole time you were.
Oh yes.
In the military.
Yes. Yeah,
right.
I was married, but my wife stayed home.
She stayed home.
Yeah.
So, where did you serve after you had your specialized training?
Well,
where did you do that?
In radio school at that, we were trained to be 18 words a minute radio operators, intermediate speed, and if your standing in class gave you some opportunity to make a choice, if there was a choice, and there were two choices, and I was high enough in the class to make that choice, and I could either choose Korea or I could choose Fifth Army. And although some might disagree, my mama didn't raise any dummy, and I chose Fifth Army and ended up in Fort Riley, Kansas with the Big Red One for the 1st Infantry Division. I probably was destined to be a company radio operator, but having played in dance bands, I said, I wonder if I could get into the 1st Division band. So I went over and auditioned and did. So I was assigned to headquarters company and played with the 1st Division band while I was there.
Wow. So did you go around and do concerts in that area?
Oh, yes.
Did you get to go to any special place while you were there?
Not anything outstanding. We remember we played on television in Topeka. Of course, television was young then, and so it was a big deal to get to
Sure
get
was.
to do that. But now, I don't recall any. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I just remembered. We were supposed to fly to Kansas City to play for the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense was there. I don't remember what the big occasion was. And we had excellent cooks, and they cooked a nice Sunday dinner. And that included, I remember, a delicious cake with icing. Got on that airplane, and it was not pressurized, and I probably should not describe everything.
Oh my goodness!
And we got off of that plane, we were all green. We did the parade, but we were sick fellers.
Oh my goodness. So after after that experience, it says on here that you went to one more place. Can you talk about that?
Yes, my wife came out, we had a nice apartment, and things were going well, but suddenly I got orders to go to Iceland. And so in August of 1956, they put us on a plane and away we went for Iceland.
Did your wife go with you?
No.
Was she? No, just you by yourself.
She could have. The policy or the regulations at the time would require, number one, that I stay an extra 6 months. Number two, that we live out on the economy. They didn't have, in those years, they didn't have much housing for married folks. And it would have been very expensive. As we understood it, we would not be able to buy our food in the PX. We would have to buy on the economy. So the decision was made that we would not do that. We just tough it out for the year.
How did you communicate with each other? Did you write letters?
Letters almost entirely. They sent I was assigned to a regimental combat team. I think it was the 281st. I'm not positive about that number, but something close to that. And they sent me up to a camp, a security camp called the Qualifjord Bay Security Camp. And Qualifjord is an Icelandic bay, and we called it Tent City. And I spent most of my tour in Iceland with occasional trips back to the main base at Keflavik, which we were really assigned. And it gives a little R&R, and I'd go on the radio, pull my share of the work. Trying to think of the term I'm looking for, a shift.
Yeah.
Take my share of the shifts. But I spent most of my time in Tent City. We had 12 of us, permanent party, 3 radio operators. The radio was our only communication link with the base. The camp commander could go down to a village, an Icelandic village that we called Esso village. I don't know what it really was supposed to be called.
Yeah.
And he could get a telephone call through if he had to. But other than that, our communication was through the radio setup.
How often did you have mail call?
Mail once a week.
Once a week.
We had 5 free movies. Mail call once a week. and that was it. Now, you asked about communicating with my wife. We were permitted one phone call, but we had to go down to Esso Village to make that phone call. And I've forgotten the precise numbers. I think it cost us 20 kroner. I don't remember how many dollars that was for 3 minutes. Wasn't very long.
Oh,
And
3 minutes. That's a short amount of time to talk.
Yeah, and it sounded like you were talking through a barrel or something. But that was it. So most of our communication was by letter.
Do you still have the letters?
I do, and you're not going to get to read them.
That's okay. I just was curious. Oh, I bet you they're just very special and hold a lot of history and love in those letters, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, they had a thing called a morale leave for hardship tours, and Iceland and Korea and others would have been on hardship tour. And the regulation said after 6 months, you could go home for 2 weeks, and then they would bring you back. Their government expense. But they changed the regulation and said you could go to Europe, but you couldn't go back to the United States.
Oh.
So we had a camp commander. We had 3 camp commanders when I was there, and this fellow I really respected him. And he said to me one day, when are you going to go home? And I reminded him of the change in the rules. He said, well, I know the colonel. I bet I could get you some help there. I said, didn't you tell me your wife has been sick? And I was just smart enough to pick up on what he was talking about. Anyway, he says, you write a letter and tell me about that. And I took it to him, and he doctored it up a little bit. We all joked and said, I didn't know how sick she really was.
She was sick because she was missing you.
I guess, love sick.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got that to leave and came back and served the rest. But I got an early release. There were budgetary problems in Washington, I guess. And if you would agree to go back to school, they give you an early release. And one of the first people they asked was me, and one of the fastest decisions I ever made was to say yes to that. And so instead of serving until August of '57, I got out in early June. And then on top of that, while I was waiting for the plane, for the time for me to get on the plane, my grandfather passed away, and the Red Cross got in touch with the Army, and they shipped me out early. But I landed in New Jersey on a Saturday morning. The funeral service is Saturday afternoon, so there was no way I could make it. So I spent 3 days in a transfer station, or what do they call it, something else.
The ETS?
Whatever. Is a place where they parked you until they could get you out. And had some interesting experiences there, but
did your wife go up there to meet you, or
she did?
She did. So she was with you while you were there.
She drove from Kentucky. She was living in in Owensboro, Kentucky. And she drove out. I don't remember if she went by herself. It was she took one trip to Fort Riley with a friend from Owensboro, and I think she did the trip by herself going to New Jersey. But we finally met. I didn't look back.
So where did you go? Where did you go after you left the Army?
Well, I kept my part of the agreement, and I went to Indiana University and completed a master's degree.
In music?
Music education.
Music education.
Yeah.
Okay, and so did you stay in that area after you finished college?
No. Well, I had to be in the reserves, so there was a civil affairs military government unit there. I served with them, and I got a job in northern Indiana, a place called Wolcottville, and so I had to sign up for another reserve unit in a place called Auburn.
So
I
did
taught-
you do reserve training once a month
Yeah, once a week.
or once a week?
Once a
How
week.
long were you in the reserves?
Well, I was supposed to be in for 2 years. That's another story. I served with this, it was an artillery unit, and I served with them until about October. And the sergeant brought about 6 of us in one day and said, "We can't pay you. We're out of money. Go home, and we'll call you when we got money." So we went home. In January, I had an annual report to complete, and I'd been in the unit just enough to know I was in the unit, but not to remember the number and the name of the unit. And so I went back to Auburn thinking I would see the name of the unit and the number on the sign, and did not. Had to go in and ask the sergeant who was in charge. He says, "And why do you want to know?" And I found it's probably best to tell the truth most of the time, so I did. He said, "Well, we called those guys back a long time ago." So I went home just knowing I was going to have to go back and serve some more time with the reserves, but they never did call me.
Oh, they never did. Wow.
So I served a little under 2 years active duty, and a little over 1 year in active reserves.
So I can't remember if I asked you if you had how many children you have.
No, you didn't ask me. I have 4 children.
You have 4 children.
4 children.
Boys, girls.
2 boys, 2 girls.
2 boys and 2 girls.
My oldest son is a veteran of the Air Force. He served.
Yeah, you had said that earlier.
He served 20 years with the Air Force, and now I have a grandson who is in Fort Campbell. Just got back from Afghanistan, and he signed up for 4 years. He's not deciding. He hasn't decided whether he was going to do re-enlist or not. But.
To re-enlist. When you look back over your time in the military, was there something you feel that really impacted your feelings about the military in general? And maybe as you've seen some of the wars that we have had since then, is there anything that you would like to share about that?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I'd like to come at it from a different angle and then maybe address them if I can. Being a draftee, I had to play the role of a draftee. That means that I was not as serious about the Army as some who enlisted, who probably weren't very serious either. That's probably not quite the right way to say it, but anyway. In other words, I did not go to the Army willingly, and yet after having served, I feel like I have some pride in the fact that I did serve. Thankful I didn't have to go to war. We served at the time of that they called the Cold War, but I didn't have to go to war, and I don't have any feeling. I don't like war. I do not promote war. I know that there are times when it happens, and so I think that if you're called on to serve, you need to go.
Very good. All right. Well, if that's all that you feel like you want to share, that's fine. If there's something else, then I just appreciate your time. I appreciate your service to our country, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your service.
Well, you're welcome. It was
Yes.
it was a good experience. I know it's makes me think that because you have a son and a grandson now that have military experience, that's a neat connection that you have with them, probably in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
I know it makes you appreciate what they've gone through in a different way. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you.